Hello, students. This is the video lecture that I'm doing about the history of TV. And I'm also going to do a very quick overview about television ratings and audience metrics. This goes along with Chapter 12 from the Mediated World. And this is one of two lectures that I'm doing about the television industry. All right, got a couple of bullet points from the textbook here. We got Farnsworth and Zworkin. Yes, there were working prototypes of the late 1920s. 1939, television is introduced, at least in a very, very big popular way, at the 1939 World's Fair, including a presidential address from FDR. We got the first televised baseball game. Now we get the beginning of regular programming, although it's really, really minuscule. And there was just, not even 1% of the country had television at this time. Mindich says, or the textbook says, that World War II stalled the development of commercial television, which is true. But then there's also the point that all of the military experiments that were done with communications technology actually made television better, so that there were some great improvements made by the military, so that when we finally did get television happening after World War II, it was probably better than it would have been than the 1939 version of what we had. And then in the 1950s, this is when television really took off. And by 1955, half of the countries have at least one TV. The rise of broadcasting. What we talk about with broadcasting is trying to reach as many people as possible. Again, this is different from a point-to-point form of communication. Mass communication is when one or a very small group of content producers send the message out very, very broadly. That's what we mean by broadcasting. And early shows, such as I Love Lucy, could get something like 2/3 of all viewers. And the Beverly Hillbillies, that was another very old show from old TV. Some of those episodes got something like 75% of the audience watching, which is kind of remarkable. But there were only a couple of channels at the time. Today, most shows, even the hit shows, are watched. 10% is even high. Most shows are watched by a fraction or just a couple of percent of the audience now, because we have so many different media outlets to choose from. Okay, that's what I want to stress. It is not that the population is no longer watching TV. It's just that we have so many things to choose from, including video games, including watching something like Twitch or watching YouTube. So it's very, very hard to get a significant majority of the public watching any one thing. Only something like the Super Bowl gets a huge audience, and then the Academy Awards and maybe some other big sporting events might get a big chunk of the audience. The Super Bowl might get 40% or maybe 48% of the audience watching, but nothing even comes close to that, which is why advertisers are willing to spend so much money to advertise on these big profile events. The way broadcasting works is, think about this: if you're trying to reach as many people as possible, you're going to kind of aim for the middle. This is what Mindich talks about. You don't want anything that's going to be controversial. You don't want anything that's going to offend people. And you're going to have sometimes people self-censoring themselves. And you're not going to end up with maybe the most provocative. Sometimes you're not going to end up with intellectually challenging programming. There's a film called Idiocracy, which is set in the future, kind of a comedy making fun of the future when people have gotten very, very dumb. That's the plot of the movie. And there's a TV show that's popular in the future called Ow, My Balls, something like that, which makes me laugh. It's very crude, very juvenile kind of humor, but I think it illustrates the point of what this slide is trying to make. Is when you're going to reach the broadest possible audience, you could end up with something very, very lowbrow.
Violence Channel, an all-new Ow, My Balls.
You're gonna get hit in the balls.
Here we have, I think I showed the same image when I talked about radio. Here we have the network affiliate relationship. It's worth stressing again because it exists, or it did exist with old time radio. It still exists today with television. When we talk about like the NBC television network, what you're really talking about is local affiliates. Each city, or at least a city of a reasonable size, has a television station. That television station is what's doing the broadcasting. Okay, that television station, and the local affiliates get some of their programming from the network, the stuff in prime time, that's from 8 to 11 o'clock at night. Some of the programming there is coming from the network, but then a lot of it's coming from the local station. The local station is creating its original content, or syndicating or buying syndicated content. The local affiliates, now I just said that the local affiliates generate some of their own content. Local affiliates make most of their money from local news. That is the reason why we have so much local news in the United States. The networks, if a network show, say something like CSI, is on like 8 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, the network is going to control the ad inventory. If there's 15 minutes of advertising in every hour of television, that's kind of like the norm. If there's 15 minutes of advertising in every hour, the CBS network might control 11 or 12 or even 13 minutes of that ad inventory. So the network is making the money, and the local station just has a little sliver of advertising that they can sell. However, in local news, if there's 15 minutes of ads and 1 hour of local news, the local station can sell all of that ad inventory. So that is why local stations like to have local news. Here is an image here from KRON. That is a station in San Francisco. And that gentleman on the right, Jack Mulmud, a SDSU grad with a journalism degree from 2020. I just wanted to throw that in there, maybe give some of y'all some inspiration, and shout out to Jack. There were some alternative systems of television other than the traditional broadcasting model, and broadcasting the content is free. It's subsidized by the ads, but there were different systems, including some pay-per-view systems that were experimented in the 50s and 60s. The technology didn't really exist at the time to do this very well, but you would pay a subscription fee, hook up your television to a telephone, and then the telephone would send some type of like signal to unscramble the picture. Okay. And there were also experiments with theater television where you'd pay money, like a ticket, like a movie theater ticket, sit in a big auditorium and watch something projected on a screen. This also didn't really work in the 1950s and 60s, although I have heard it worked well with boxing matches. I have heard that it did work with boxing matches. And it's interesting to me that pay-per-view, which is a big thriving industry, often does, boxing matches, MMA fights, things like that. So people seem willing to pay to watch that kind of programming. Of famous programs from the 1950s, in case you are not aware of them, we have I Love Lucy on the top left. Very, very funny show. Very, very funny show. Kind of a domestic situation comedy. That kind of established the blueprint that many, many other situation comedies have used, and also pioneered a multi-camera technique where you film or videotape the actors almost like they're doing a one-act play, and it's like one wall of the living room is removed. That's where an audience sits, and the audience can laugh at the jokes. I Love Lucy really perfected that model, which is what many things are copying. And then moving over to the right, that's The Honeymooners. That is another popular situation comedy, super low budget. I mean, that is the most unbelievably low budget show. And that was done, it was recorded. Many of the episodes were recorded live. So the actors would fumble and flub or do ad libs or things like that. I think The Honeymooners is still pretty funny. Although when the man, Ralph Cramden, threatens to punch his wife in the face, it's a little weird. You never think he's actually going to punch her because he does love her, but it's just a little weird, when he kind of like winds up his fist and says, one of these days. It's not funny to threaten to punch your wife. That's we don't like that. Then on the bottom left, we have Ed Sullivan. That was a variety show. Many musical acts were introduced to the American public on the Ed Sullivan Show, including the Beatles. The Beatles on Ed Sullivan was one of those sort of legendary TV performances. And then we have on the bottom right, Texaco Star Theater, starring Milton Berle, who was a famous comedian from vaudeville, known for being a famous joke thief. Yeah, Milton Berle was known for stealing jokes. An old vaudeville joke was the audience laughed so hard Milton Berle dropped his notebook. But he was extremely popular when he had a television show, and many people credit the early growth of television in the late 40s with Milton to Milton Berle, that he was so popular and people wanted to buy TV just to watch Uncle Milty. And then the name of the show, Texaco Star Theater, shows an early example of product placement or brand integration, sponsored by Texaco Gasoline. So they just called the show Texaco Star Theater. I'm going to go over this again in the next lecture, but I just wanted to throw this out here to make sure you are familiar with the concept. Syndication. Okay, I've already mentioned that local stations generate some of their programming and that the network provides some of the programming to fill in the gap. You know, if a local station has some airtime they need to fill, what they typically will do will buy a syndicated show. That is a show that is either created specifically to be sold to local markets, or it's an older TV show that's already been on broadcast television for a while. And historically, if a show was on the air for 5-6 years and generated 100 episodes, you could then syndicate that and sell it into the rerun market. Friends has done extraordinarily well as a rerun. That is the syndication market. And yeah, the image here with the text on the screen gives you some idea that all of those people from Friends, you know, they make, or their estate makes, a tremendous amount of money, even though they don't have to work. They did the work long ago, and the show just keeps getting resold, and in foreign countries as well. The production company, in this case it was Warner Brothers, makes all that money. So NBC got Friends popular, but when the show goes into syndication, it's Warner Brothers that makes the money. So if you want to make money in television, make a show that syndicates well, and you can keep selling it for decades, right? I Love Lucy is still on the air in some markets. This is from the textbook, this famous quote, "The vast wasteland." Newton Minow, who was the head of the FCC, was giving a speech at the convention for the National Association of Broadcasters, NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters. And Newton Minow stood up there and basically told the people in, you know, a kind of diplomatic way, your content is crap. Okay, your content is crap. You're not putting out anything anything that's helping the public or anything that is helping people. After, I mean, it was years after, but after Newton Minow makes this famous speech, other people become frustrated by the nature of broadcast television and the overwhelming amount of commercials and advertising that's there. And we ended up with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And then we did have some limited form of public television in the United States. It is nowhere nearly as robust as state-sponsored media in other countries, okay? Public television gets a portion of the money from the government, and then viewers voluntarily give money. They also get donations from big nonprofit organizations called underwriting. The programming that's on public television doesn't have to try and get a huge audience or appeal to a lot of people, so they can do things like Sesame Street, which I'm hoping many of y'all are familiar with very educational programming, or something like PBS NewsHour, which is very informative, not chasing the trend of the day or the sleazy gossip of the day. So that's what we associate public television with. Okay, that's what we associate public television with. And just to go back to Sesame Street, my wife, my khubsurat bivi, means my beautiful wife, was one of those little kids on Sesame Street. So I'm going to play a clip that includes my wife. She's the little Pakistani girl in the top left. Just, it's not going to be on the quiz, whatever, but I'm the professor. I want to do this. Maybe it'll make y'all laugh or smile. And I did read on Wikipedia that my wife, Sanan Keshki, was the first Pakistani American to be a regular on an American TV show. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know who else is going to argue with it. But anyway, here she is, Sanan Keshki on Sesame Street, early 70s.
Well, see, what do we got here? We got some kids, 4 kids, and one of them, Jay, is the only boy. So that could be an answer. But wow, you just can't miss that girl that's hanging upside down there. She's really doing her own thing. Yeah, I would say that's the right answer. If you guessed the girl that's hanging upside down, that's the right answer.
Okay, now I'm going to, I don't know how I'm doing on time. I'm probably talking too long. I'm going to talk about ratings quickly. Okay. I think I went over this when I talked about radio. Whatever. We'll do it again. A rating is a percent. Okay. That's what you base. If you can remember one thing, if you can remember one thing, rating is a percent. That's all you got to remember. Everything else is gravy. Okay. At its most basic, it is a percent of television households. At its most basic percent, it's television households. If you get the demographic information, usually 18 to 49, a 4 in 18 to 49 means 4% of all individuals in America aged 18 to 49 who have access to TV. Okay, so we take everyone aged 18 to 49 in the United States who has access to TV. And even if you don't have a TV, if you have a phone, you consider to have access to TV. If you have a smartphone or the internet, okay, you're considered to have access to TV. A 4 in the prime demo means 4% of that group watched your show. Now, a share is also a percent, but you remove from the sample the people who aren't watching TV. Okay, so a share is going to be higher than a rating. What is the rating for channel 2? 3 out of 10. That would be 30%, a rating of 30. 3 out of 10 is 30. I'm not great at math, but that's 30%. I know that. What's the share for channel 2? Now it's 3 out of 6. Because we're going to remove these dark monopoly homes that are not watching TV. Maybe they're at the club. Maybe they're doing something else. Maybe they're having conversation with their significant other. Who knows? They're not watching TV. 3 out of 6 would be 50%. So channel 2 would have a 50 share. Okay. So advertisers and media producers will talk about ratings and shares. That's what they're talking about. Where do the ratings come from? You take a small sample. Ideally, it's representative, right? If you've taken any kind of research methods class, you maybe understand. You want something that's demographically representative in terms of gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, income. You want to get a sample that represents the entire population. You don't have to poll every single person in the United States to get a rating, okay? If you're making soup for someone and you want to see what the soup tastes like, you don't have to drink all the soup to determine that there's too much salt or not enough pepper, right? You can take a sample and that sample will be indicative of the whole. That's the same way that ratings work. Some of the information comes from electronic devices. There could be an electronic device. Here, I'll just go to the next slide. There's a diary. They literally give you a paper book. Nielsen is the company that does this. They give you a book, you fill it out for a week. What show did you watch? Who was in the room? Who watched? And they can get the demographic information. What's your age? What's your income, etc. Problem with this is that people don't remember what they watched, or people might mislead, right? People might mislead. You know, I might hypothetically be embarrassed to tell you that I watched Guy's Grocery Games because I'm a college professor. I might say, oh, I watched a documentary on the history of the Ukraine conflict. No, I watched Guy's Grocery Games. I'm just embarrassed to admit it. A set meter is an electronic device that would actually go on the TV, and these still exist. That records, if I'm flipping around, if I put it on Guy's Grocery Games, go to ESPN, then I watch Judge Judy, whatever, it's going to record what was tuned in. I don't have to do anything at all. The downside to the set meters is that it doesn't tell you who's in the room, right? Like maybe in my home, I put it on Guy's Grocery Games. I don't know why I'm stuck on this. I put it on this, mindless kind of game show with Guy Fieri, Flavortown. I leave the room. The dog is sitting there watching. It doesn't say, you don't know who's in the room. It just says in the Arsenault household, that TV was on this channel. Okay. that's very accurate. Doesn't have to rely on human memory, but it doesn't tell you who's in the room. A people meter is a tiny electronic device also used for measuring radio that can detect from the audio what someone was watching. And because the electronic device is paired to an individual, it can also give you the demographic information, right? If I'm wearing a device, they're going to know me, my age, etc. They know who I am. Oh, that's Arsenault's device. That's the mother-in-law's device. That's Nano's device. That's his kid's device. You know, his son is wearing that. That's the wife's device, and the dog does not have a device. So a people meter is probably the more accurate way of gauging audience metrics, but they still use diaries because diaries are very cheap. You just give someone a paper diary and they still use set meters. Here we have from April 4th, 2024. Let's read what this says. In the latest TV ratings, NBC's Chicago Med was the most watched show on Wednesday, while CBS dominated the night in the most coveted and delicious 18 to 49 demographic. Okay, so Chicago Med had more people watching, but Survivor had more people in the demo. Okay, you can have more people watching, but maybe you don't have the people in the 18 to 49 age range. CBS Survivor had a season high. I'm just reading. CBS Survivor had a season high, 5.1 total million viewers, 0.8 in the demo. That means of individuals aged 18 to 49 in the United States who have access to TV, 0.8% watched Survivor. And that is considered a hit. This is how fragmented the audience is, that a 0.8 in the demo can be considered a hit. And The Amazing Race was down to a 0.4. When they say steady, that means the previous episode probably did a 0.4 as well. Chicago Med, looking at NBC now, more total people, but only a 0.5 in the demo. To me, this would suggest that a good chunk of the Chicago Med audience is over the age of 49. You got a lot of mature, not going to say old, you got a lot of mature seniors watching, people in their 50s or 60s, that Survivor is getting the 18 to 49. That's how to understand ratings. Now, the holy grail of audience metrics would be a people meter. Remember, I talked about a people meter. We know what that is, right? A people meter that not only tracked your media usage, but also tracked your product purchases. This is what the whole media advertising industry would want. So that if you went through the store, Target, CVS, Vaughn's, wherever, then they could match up. You know, this woman, she's 20 years old. She watched Princess Diaries or whatever. You know, she watched a Harry Potter movie, and then she went and she bought this kind of suntan lotion, and then she went and bought this kind of lipstick. If you could get that kind of granular data at a mass level, then when you wanted to sell a new product, hey, I have a new type of toothpaste. What kind of person buys my toothpaste, and what kind of TV show are they more likely to watch? This kind of system, very Big Brother, very Orwellian, does not exist, but this is the goal of what the advertising and media industries would like to implement. And conceivably, this type of people meter could even track print. If you read a newspaper, if you looked at a website, whatever, conceivably it could track everything. This does not exist, but the ultimate goal of audience metrics is to create this level of data. Now, when it comes to streaming, I have another video lecture where I'll talk more about streaming. When it comes to streaming, it's proven too difficult to calculate the size of the audience, probably because there are so many ways, so many devices that you could watch something on. And I could start watching, you know, I've been watching King of Queens at the gym. I know I don't look like I go to the gym. I do, I swear. I've been watching King of Queens on my phone here. Can you see that? Yeah. It's not showing up. There we go. If I'm watching King of Queens here and then I go home and I watch Peacock at home, it might count me as two people when that's not really two people. It's just the same person who continued watching King of Queens on different devices. So this is a very complicated, long-winded way of saying that we do not calculate number of people when it comes to streaming. They just calculate the minutes that were streamed. Okay, so for 2023, we're going back to 2023. These are original streaming programs, not something like Friends or Coco, that movie, or something else, which was created for another broadcast network, cable channel, or movie theater, and then ended up on streaming. These are things that were created specifically for streaming. How many minutes were streamed, and from the minutes that were streamed, you could gauge the popularity. Ted Lasso had almost 17 billion minutes streamed. So we just calculate minutes that were streamed. The Mandalorian is there. I don't even know what Genie in Georgia is. I have no idea what that is. And look, we got Love is Blind there as well. So for television shows on cable and broadcasting, the system of ratings still exists, but we're moving more towards an era where we just calculate the number of minutes that were streamed. Okay, I'm done. I think I probably went too long. I'm gonna have to edit this thing, try to get it down to a manageable length, but hopefully y'all learned something from this.